I'm glad everybody could make it this afternoon or this evening, wherever you are. And did the administrative part of this to get you all set up. And we will be recording this so we can put it on the website for later viewing. Luckily, we have 2 months before Andy teaches in January, and we can use that as marketing material. So his magic today will be convincing everybody to sign up. I have some news items. I have some things to have you anticipate, and I also have some things I want you to remember. I broke it into 3 parts. News items. I was delighted to receive thank you notes and accolades for all our folks who work behind the scenes when I made the announcement and the board decided to cancel the holiday show. This was a big step. Everybody needed a little break, and I think everybody's breathed a sigh of relief. We just been going full bore since April, and I didn't give anybody a break during the summer when normally we'd sort of step back and take a breather. So that was good, but you only get a short rest because there are things coming we need to be prepared for. I am excited. The new Color My World show is on the website. The awards have been awarded, and we've already sold 3 paintings. Isn't that exciting? Wow. I want to congratulate Carolyn Streed. She sold her Raven, and Madeline Schulman sold her beautiful cottage, and Tad sold one of his birds. So congratulations to you all. And what, it's been up not even a week? Oh, just a week. Anyway, that's exciting. Out of 53 paintings. Okay, things we need to anticipate. Drew Hill is going to be teaching one of our little gallery classes on December the 1st, drawing for the fearful. I hate to draw. I'll confess. I never got that gene somewhere or another, but I love to paint. So I'm going to take her class, sort of maybe get me jazzed back up. And I hope all of you will. And it's so affordable, $35. How can you? And I'll encourage you to send a link and get your grandchildren involved. You know, what an opportunity. You know, kids in school are not getting the art classes that they would normally now. So this is another opportunity for you to share your art, love of art with your children and your grandchildren. So just an idea. Also in December, just in time for the holiday period, you can get replays of all the gallery classes we did in April. Those 6 instructors have given us permission to do that again and replay it at cost of $25 a piece. You can read about all this in our sketchbook, but that's pretty cool. And they'll be replayed 2 days at a time. We have something free coming. I'm going to let Sue Ritz talk for a little bit. Unmute yourself, Sue, and tell us about the free class that we're going to offer to the membership.
Okay, so I'm Sue Ritz, your AV team chief, and Mike Dutton, who is the guy who has come up with the Framers Corner, is going to be giving a free framing design class on the 24th of November from 9 a.m. to around 11. It's how to design matting for your art piece that goes with SOG rules, and then how to design that for the painting for a show for SOG that complies with all the standards, and then just how to go ahead and cut your mat, choose your mat, what Framers Corner is going to be like in the next year. We kind of anticipate that maybe sometime early next year we'll be able to actually launch Framers Corner so that you can actually buy the materials through SOG like we had been anticipating last April, but you know, COVID. So we're really excited about that. And it is free, free member benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Hey, okay, couple things to remember. Gym Click tickets, deadline looms on December the 2nd. Remember, all your raffle ticket proceeds go straight to the scholarship fund. If you buy 5 tickets, $100, they're $25 each, but if you buy $100 worth, you get 5 tickets. You'll also be entered into a raffle for one of our April gallery classes, a value of $35. And Bev Heasley, our chair of the fundraising committee, and mind you, I called it fun, not fund. She asked me to introduce her team of Kathy Sanders and PJ Kathy. So they're helping count the money. Let's see, the other deadline is, we have 2. Western Fed deadline is in January, but if you want help with your editing your photos so that you're sure that they won't get rejected, then Dennis or I can help you with that. Our new show, Lasting Impressions, the deadline for entry is December the 18th. I believe that's the one that Andy is our juror for. So get your stuff ready. We needed to make the deadline early because of the holidays, of course. We don't want everybody working right through the holidays. And in December, we don't have any general meeting, but the board of directors will be meeting on December the 7th. And during that meeting, Bev will have all the ticket stubs of those who bought $100 or more worth of Gym Click tickets. And we'll do the drawing and make the announcement for that. So, okay, I want to tell you about Andy. I'm going to read this bio that Jenny put together for me. Thank you, Jenny. Andy has been an artist to some extent since he was a child. And as an adult, his career was as a medical illustrator. In the mid-1990s, he took to watercolor as a diversion of sorts and quickly found artists that impressed him with their use of the medium. In 2005, success came to Andy after winning an international watercolor competition through American Artist magazine, which placed his artwork on their cover. That must have been exciting. Since then, he's been a featured artist in many other magazines and has become a sought-after workshop instructor. And we're honored to have you. He is especially fond of painting on location and has been a prized participant in plein air conventions, both nationally and internationally. Andy's professional ties include membership in the Plein Air Painters of America and the American Watercolor Society, both awarding his artwork numerous times. His work has been in multiple galleries, and there have been many published articles that give a voice to his enthusiasm for watercolor. Now, as a professional instructor, Andy stresses skills that have made a difference to his own artwork: value studies, color mixing, and use of a sketchbook as often as possible. His workshops in January will teach you more about these skills in developing your best watercolor artwork. All right, so as I mentioned before, I want everybody to remain muted. If you have questions, you will use chat to do that, and we'll make sure Andy sees them.
Yeah, I hope that works.
Okay.
Except when I share my screen, I'm hoping that I can go back and see the chat, and that you're not suddenly. I'm not sure how that works actually.
I think they'll show up on the right-hand corner, Andy. If you open up participants,
Yeah,
The
I've already got
chat's
the
up.
chat up, but I'm saying when I share my screen and show this video, if I can go back to the Zoom call and you're still seeing the video and not my Zoom screen. So we'll give it a shot. We'll see what happens here.
Okay, over to you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kay, for that nice introduction. I appreciate it. So I know time is short today. That's why I'm in the home instead of at the studio. I only had about 30 minutes or 40 minutes for a demo. So what I'm going to do is I had some pre-recorded things that I've done for my workshops, pretty typical of what you would learn in my workshop. And one of the main exercises that I like to do with my students is we all paint from the same reference photo. And I do them on the same piece of paper, like a 12 by 16 block. And I draw it twice, and I do it. We'll work together where I do the first step of the value study, and you kind of watch me do it and talk my way through it, and then I give you time, and you're gonna do yours, and I'll be on the the Zoom meeting and everything during the workshop while you're doing yours. So if you have questions, you can ask. And then you'll watch me do the second step, and then you'll have time to do it back and forth. So you don't have to feel like you're watching and listening and painting at the same time. It's still just like a regular workshop where I would call you up by my table, you watch me do it, and I'm like, okay, now you guys all go sit down and do that step, and then I'll call you back up. And it's worked pretty well, I think. The workshops of people have been learning a lot. Like I said, basically we're just the only thing you're missing from the actual workshop is me walking around and catching mistakes or something. As hey, there's another cat. Catching mistakes or something as they're happening, but that's that's life. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen and start this video. And we'll see what happens from there. I want to move this over to the side just a bit. Click this video over. If I start running out of time, let me know and I can fast forward or something, okay? Okay, I'm gonna zoom out. And I'll go to picture in picture just for a bit here to get started. Does it sound okay? So one of the things that I do when I'm drawing this, now we've got two vertical format paintings here.
Can you crank up the sound?
A value study, one for color. I'm going to put my pencil on the paper and establish that ground plane first. And you can see this is pretty typical of when you have a city scene with tall buildings. We've got this big clock tower in the background. You need to have room to include these structures. So usually you're going to have a lower horizon line when you're tackling scenes like this, okay? So make sure that you're paying attention to that. Leave enough room for the clock tower. And another thing to pay attention to when you have one of these tall structures, make sure that you're leaving a good amount of space above it on the top to let it breathe a little bit. Don't make it so tall that it's hovering right near the top of your painting, okay? Either if you have a tall structure, either make sure they go right up off the paper or have them end low enough so it doesn't become a bad tangent at the top of your scene. So I can go ahead and just kind of make that ground plane right across the paper for both the value study and the color one. Now very lightly, maybe I should zoom in a little bit here. We'll get back to the above. I'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see, because I'm going to draw a little lightly first. I want you to be able to see some of these pencil marks. Okay. So I'm going to just kind of place all my objects on the paper lightly first. Now, I want that clock tower. It's about a third of the way across the paper here, okay? This is about a third of the way over. This is about a third of the way over. And again, make sure you've given it room to breathe. Don't make it too tall. So there's my clock tower. Here's the buildings on the other side. The building kind of going right up and off the page here. And then we've got this building on the left that's going to help kind of frame everything on this side of the composition. Okay. And maybe just a little bit taller on the clock tower here. And then the top of this structure, this little pink side building, that's about halfway up the page. Okay. So I've got that right about halfway up the page here. Just paying attention to small things like that will help your drawing become a little bit more convincing. Another thing I want to talk about is the line of the figures' heads, okay? When I put my pencil down here, no matter where the people are in this scene, their heads line up, Okay, so just going right through this person's head, this person's head, this person's head, just even all the people way in the distance, way back here, which you probably can't see on the video stream, but there's people way back here and their heads kind of line up too, okay? So that our point of reference is our line of sight, our eyes, and we're typically looking at other people right in the face too, eye to eye, okay? So no matter where they are in the scene, heads should line up. It's just the closer they get to us, the feet end up, they're taller and their feet end up lower on the page, okay? So that line of sight where my figures are, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna get this lady in first. In here, now all the other figures, now you can have a little variety obviously, but pretty close to all the rest of the figures having their heads kind of line up at that same level here. And I'll let this lady on the right kind of connect to the buildings a little better. Okay, we've got a little cluster of figures walking into the shops here on the left, same thing, more people in the distance, okay. All right, so everything is gonna fit for my value study. I'm gonna tighten up the drawing a little bit here. Keep it simple. This is just for the value study. It doesn't have to be anything remarkable, all right. I'm just gonna work through some of the issues on here. Make sure we're planning our washes out accordingly. Okay, so we've got that structure on the left coming down. Now we've got some of the people standing here. Darker, it looks like there's just a little gathering of them there. Okay, coming back out here. Now I've got my clock tower. This beautiful structure. Make sure I'm drawing this pretty decently. This is the star of the show. You do tend to get a little distortion when the camera does when you're taking shots of tall structures like this. So you have to compensate on your drawing. Don't make it look too weird. Sometimes they're really kind of leaning in towards the center of the page. You get this kind of a tunnel effect. So you have to pay attention to that. Make sure you're fixing that when you do your drawing. Okay, now the building, the bottom of this building is below that distant horizon line, okay? So that's coming in here, and now I can just, again, kind of paint through these figures here. All right, this guy was walking with his girlfriend, this lady walking in. Luckily, the figures are mostly wearing darker clothes, so we can paint right through them in the early stages of our painting and not worry about painting around them. They're all kind of backlit. Okay, everything is going to fit. I don't have to worry about architecture, especially on the value study. It's not a big deal. So I've got it drawn once for the value study. I'm going to go ahead and draw it one more time.
I'm going to fast forward here through the second drawing, okay, when I can find a spot where we can speed up things. So you don't need to necessarily see me. You can see me draw it fast here a second time, but speed drawing. But it's a lot of the same things. I start out very lightly first, placing the objects with light pencil marks in case I have to erase. I don't want to draw too darkly. And I'm just using ovals and little simple lines for where the figures are going to be. Make sure they're going to fit, make sure their heads are all lined up. And then I come back in with darken up the pencil marks. And I try and keep the pencil on the paper as I'm doing this as much as I can. So I do that kind of a contour drawing. And the benefit of doing a contour drawing is it keeps you away from messing around too much with details inside those building shapes. If you notice, I'm not drawing a lot of doorways and windows and whatnot. I can just paint those things. It's important to leave some of that information just for your brush to be able to make those marks. I'm always telling my students, be careful how much you draw because all those pencil marks become little visual stop signs like a coloring book, and you tend to try and stay in the lines. So just give yourself the amount of information you need to paint the big shapes, the important things, and then make sure you're leaving something for the brush to be able to indicate some of those other shapes. Pretty soon, once I'm done with this drawing, I'll go ahead and hit play again. Does this sound better if I'm just playing it and narrating and not having the actual sound? Does the sound to my computer work better or no? I think you have to unmute yourself, Kay.
I
Oh, it
like
sounds
I like you talking and speeding it up.
okay. Good. I'll leave it this way. Then when I hit play, I'll turn that sound down. Sounds good. So then I'm going to take my eraser and just kind of lift off a lot. I just went and darkened in all those pencil marks. I don't want all that graphite on there. When I wet my paper, it'll smear. So I darkened up quite a bit so I can come in with a kneaded eraser and just lift off some of that stuff, especially all those light lines I made initially. And now you're just seeing what, some of the darker pencil marks that I left behind.
To be looking, I guess I better stick to this side.
All right. So I got the sound down on that. I'll just narrate this now. So now I'm gonna start by doing the. I'm gonna try and figure out what I'm gonna leave white paper on my value study. So I squint and I'm seeing the light on the side of that tower. The sun's coming from the left, obviously, and hitting some of those surfaces. The tower that's facing us is middle value. That's out of the sun. We've got a few little spots down below. The light coming through the plaza, that's going to be a light area. Obviously, the sky. That building on the left, I'm going to try and keep that mostly to middle value and darks. I don't want to draw a bunch of attention over there. The light's coming from the left, so I want to keep that mostly in shadow. And if I have any sunlight, I'm going to keep it on the windows, reflecting some of the sky on the right side. So the right building will be mostly in middle value with some lights and some small darker details. And the building on the left, I'll just leave that as middle value and dark to simplify things. Okay, so just kind of talking my way through. That's so important to have a good plan of attack before you go in here. Talk your way through it, make your decisions. While I'm mixing my middle value puddle, I'm kind of looking at the photo, squinting at it the whole time also. Just making sure, like I said, when I start painting, I've got a lot of those things worked out in my head ahead of time. You don't want to be in the middle of painting that big shape and trying to figure out what it is you're doing. Okay, once the brush hits the paper, you should have a pretty good idea of what you're trying to accomplish, so you can just paint. There's too many things to worry about in the guts of the painting. So all that prep work is important.
Will you tell us the color names?
This is just Payne's Gray paint that I'm using here right now. If you go around my palette here, let me get the chat out of the way. I'm going to pause this so you can see this. So if you go around my palette along the top here, Payne's Gray is on that top left that I've been using. To the right of that is ultramarine blue, then cobalt blue, then cerulean blue, and then cobalt turquoise. So those are all my cool colors up on that top row. Then as I come on this side, I've got neutral tint, which is the warm dark. My Payne's Gray has got some blue in it, so that's my cool dark. Neutral tint is more of a kind of a violet-y dark. So I put that by my browns, a warmer dark. So I've got neutral tint, burnt sienna, raw sienna, and quinacridone gold. And then once my hand is out of the way here, down below, I've got cadmium lemon, alizarin crimson. Wait till I'm done mixing that puddle and I get my hand out of the way. Nice big fluid puddle for that big connected shape, by the way. Look how much water is in there. Oops. Oh my goodness, what did I do? Instead of hitting pause, I hit jumped way ahead here. So to the left of cadmium lemon is alizarin crimson, and then opera. You can see the opera is mostly empty right now. I don't use it that much to keep it in there all the time. If I have a painting where I think I'm going to want to have some of that pink in there, I'll squeeze a little bit of opera out before I start painting, but that's just the well for the opera to the left of alizarin crimson. And then to the left of opera is cadmium red light, a real bright, kind of opaque, orangey red. That I don't use a lot of mixtures. It's mostly for accents and stop signs and things like that, tail lights, okay? And then to the left of cadmium red, there's an empty well. Sometimes I have Windsor red in there, which is more like an apple red, but I don't use it that much, so it's pretty much empty. And then way on the left corner is lavender. It's kind of an opaque violet that it's a Holbein color. And I really like it, especially in skies. It's got a little bit of white in it, and it helps to give the skies a little bit of opacity and some chalkiness to it instead of just using blue all the time. It's just a nice color to kind of take the edge off of some of your other washes. And I do like the fact that it's got a little bit of white in it. So. All right. So I'm talking my way through it one more time here, making sure I know what I'm going to connect. I'm just going to start up in that top left corner, that whole left side. I'm not going to leave any lights over there really. I want to just kind of fill that in. Again, with the direction of the sunlight, I don't want to add too much visual interest on both sides of the alley. So I'm going to try and just kind of paint the outside edge of that building with all the shops and then just fill it in. And I can come back in later with darks and add some doorways and windows and stuff. So keep loading my brush, that big fluid puddle. I had a lot to cover, so I mixed a nice big puddle. Keep going back to the well, keep reloading that brush, okay? I want to make sure I've got a nice big fluid, consistent shape while I'm painting this. So I'm painting that big shadow on the bottom. All those little spots that I talked about at the beginning are the spots that I'm going to leave white paper. The lights, the sky, the left side of the tower, the light coming through the plaza, the windows, everything else I'm going to try and connect. So this spot right here, what I'm talking about right here on the demo, okay, when I'm going to rewind just a little bit here. Once in a while, you're going to find yourself at a point. I try and work from a wet edge all the time, one bead, but every once in a while, you're going to end up trying to go back and forth between two edges, okay? So right here, when I come back, I'm going to have to darken up the bottom of that building on the right later anyways with some darks and doorways. So if I get a little hard edge there, it's okay. But I don't want to get a hard edge up here as I'm trying to merge all the figures and stuff into the building. So I'm going to leave this area that I painted for now. And if I come back to it soon enough, maybe it'll still be wet. But again, if it's not, it's okay because I'll come back over it later with a dark. So I'm going to switch gears and go over to that tower and start painting up there now and make sure that that's getting connected. And I'm going to leave some lights on the left side of that tower. I switched to a little smaller brush for this because there's some smaller shapes I need to paint around. And just kind of keeping it simple. The whole time I'm doing this, I'm squinting down at the photo, okay? Just making sure all I'm seeing are the big shapes. I don't want to see any details, especially on the value study. Keep it simple. Fill that whole face of the tower that's facing us. It's all in middle value. As I get down here, maybe leave a couple little snippets for awnings or something shining through, catching some sunlight, merging the figures in with it now too. The heads of the figures, the main ones, bringing them right down, making connections, just filling that in. That building on the left has a couple of small spots where the rooftop is catching some sun too. So I'll leave a couple of those behind and join those figures down. And once that's all joined, now I can come back to that building and start filling that in. The only things I have to worry about on the right side of that building is that lantern. If I want to leave a little light on the edge of the lantern and the windows. Otherwise, that's all filled in as a big shape too. And that big anchoring middle value shape is already descriptive enough so you've got the viewer convinced of what kind of a scene it is that they're looking at, all right? This is what sets the composition for your painting. You've got one big shape. When I do this in color now, I'm going to repaint this shape on my color painting after I get the light wash on and let the pinks and browns and grays and blues all merge together. And so instead of just one big puddle of gray, I'm going to repaint that shape, but just losing edges, keep it real nice and watery, worrying about the big stuff. All the little stuff can wait till the end. The windows and the figures and the doorways and the lanterns. And so I don't even worry about that at this stage of the painting. So now I'm going to switch gears over to the color side. And all the areas that I left white paper on my value study, obviously they need some color on them, right? So I'm going to have to go in and establish some of that here. And I'll probably wet my paper a little bit first. And so the white area, I need some very pale blue sky up there. I need some pale warm on the side of the tower, some very pale gray or something down here in the plaza. The windows are going to be reflecting the sky. So when I paint the sky, I'm just going to go right into the buildings. I'm not going to paint around anything that's darker. All right.
Hunter.
On this first wash, it's just going to be covered up. So I think I might just go ahead and fast forward just a little bit more as I do this. I'm going to mix my puddles first. Got that pale blue. This is going to be, and there's that lavender that I love. Okay, I'll probably get a little bit of that in my sky too. I'm going to need some warm color for some raw sienna and burnt sienna for the tower. Hope you're not seeing my chat square over I don't think you are, but covering up my palette right now. I have it open so I can see if you have questions, but. So I'm going to go ahead and wet my sponge. I've got my colors mixed. Wet that paper down. There's nothing that needs to stay white, so I can wet the whole thing down. Thanks, Susan. And I like to use a sponge when I wet my paper because it lets me do just that. I can get it wet and then I can squeeze it out and go over it again where I'm kind of lifting some of that water off again. So my paper is not soaking wet. It's just damp. I just want these first colors to kind of move around the paper softly. All right. So again, I'm not getting a ton of water on there with the sponge. It's just to make sure that everything stays fluid. So that sky color, it's reflecting in the window as I paint the sky, come right into it. Don't worry about shapes that are darker, paint right through them. So I'm looking at the white spots on my value study, the areas I left white paper, and I'm just filling them in with color. The colors that they're going to need to be. Most of this is going to get covered up. Obviously, it looks like about 60% of the painting is going to have another wash over the top of it. So I'm not worried about it. Get a little bit more sky down there with a smaller brush, and then pretty soon I'm going to clean my brush off and grab that warm color for the side of the tower and just kind of knock that in too. And it's okay if it fuzzes a little bit into my sky. I don't worry about that. I like it when my shapes fuzz together in these early stages. I'm going to come back with that middle value face of the clock tower that's facing us and put that in later, and that'll be enough to show the definition. So if the sunny side is fuzzing into the sky a bit, no problem. Just dropping in that sunlight. Okay, so now I need to go down below, and if there's some colors on the awnings and stuff, maybe there's some turquoisey colors or pink or something, whatever it is you want to put down there, that's fine. Like I said, most of that's going to get covered up again anyways. There's some opera left in there. I'm going to get a little bit of pink for that building. That tower has some pink on it in spots too. Okay, there's that warmth on the plaza. Now, when you look at the reference photo, it's pretty washed out. That's the problem of working with cameras and photographs. It picked up all that nice color in the shadows and it just bleached out the sky and the light in there. So I'm just kind of making it up a little bit. I definitely put that warmer gray through the plaza where the sun was hitting it than what you're seeing in the reference photo. But And now, because I don't want any weird hard edges, even though most of this is going to get covered up later, I'm still just going to go ahead and continue on and try and fill the rest of the whites in with something. So that it's, again, that's mostly just so that later on I don't have a weird hard edge where this light shape stopped, and I'm going to cover it up. Plus, when I paint that, that ground plane, I might leave a few more gaps than what I did on the value study. And if I leave some little gaps, it'll be better if I have that light violet underneath it than white paper. Okay, so it's still important to cover it up, even though I'm going to be covering up most of it up again later anyways with darker values. Okay, I think at this point, I'm going to need to let this dry a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward, and we're going to get to this next stage where once this is dry, and I can come in with a middle value wash on the color painting. All right, it's dry. So now I need to get that middle value shape onto there and pre-mix all my colors. I kind of talk my way through it, what colors I'm going to want. A lot of hand gesturing. You think I'm Italian or something with all this, talking with my hands. So I've got the sky filled in. I've got the light side of the tower filled in. I've got the windows filled in. Got the light down there in the plaza. All that was from my first wash. That's all I wanted to achieve from that. All right, fast forward here. I'm going to work from a bead. Stick to this plan of my value study, keeping that left side just simple, up into that tower, leaving some little shapes behind. But it's going to be important to pre-mix my puddles before I do this. Just like I did on the value study when I had that big puddle of Payne's Gray, I want to work from a wet edge, keep reloading my brush, keep it fluid. So I'm going to mix a lot of those colors that I see onto my palette now. Burnt sienna, raw sienna, neutral tint. You see them all going in here. That's all three of those colors on the left. So you can see that neutral tint is a lot warmer than the Payne's Gray is. I'm just throwing some of the blues, just a nice big variety of middle value colors is all. Browns, blues, grays. Just keep it interesting is all. But it's the same consistency as that first middle value puddle that I mixed to Payne's Gray. A lot of paint, so it's middle value, but also a lot of water, so it's fluid. Mix and mix and mix. And this is kind of nice. I wish I could fast forward to real life when I'm doing some of these things. Okay, I'll slow down here so you can watch it paint again now. Get a little bit more pink up there. So again, colors don't matter that much. You see when I'm mixing colors, especially when you see it, how fast I was doing it there in fast motion. I'm jumping all over my palette. I don't even keep track half the time of what colors I'm using. I'm just adjusting them until it looks right. Trying to get that interesting shape on the edge of the building there. But when I'm painting this shape, keep looking back to my value study as I'm doing this too, and try and notice how much I'm following that plan. I want to really copy that shape as close as I can. Obviously, I'll take a little bit more time and care on the color painting, but overall, I want to maintain that simplicity. Keep reloading my brush. I'm working with a little bit smaller brush just because I'm changing the colors more often than I did with the value study. So, but it's still a pretty good size brush. It's like a size 14 or 16, like one of those pseudo sable brushes or something. I wanted that light coming through the plaza to be a little softer, and it had dried a lot. So I painted it, and then I went and rinsed my brush off and just lifted some of that paint off, so it's a little bit more of a glow coming through there instead of a harsh edge. Just trying to get a variety of the blue grays and the shadows there. My brush strokes follow the direction a lot of time of what I'm doing there, so that perspective of the cobblestone alley there going up, you can see my I leave some little brush strokes behind, I want it to follow the perspective lines anyway. So I'm painting that direction. And then just like on the value study, that's a good place to pause and go back up to the tower now. So if I get a hard edge down below there, it's okay. I'm going to cover it up anyways. Try and leave that little gap in the middle. Now I'm just going to leave some highlights for the left side of that tower where some sunspots are hidden. Keeping it simple for these exercises. This is going to be the same thing as in the workshop. I'm always telling my students, don't worry, we're not really making paintings, okay? They're lessons, exercises. This is a lot harder than it looks. For those, some of you have taken workshops from me before, and I know it looks easy when I'm doing it, it makes sense, but when you have to sit down and take all that stuff in the reference photograph and simplify it down, it's a lot more difficult than it looks. So I try and keep things simple. I try and get it out of your head that you're doing paintings, and treat it more as lessons and exercises. Again, it frees you up to have a little bit more fun and learn more and not worry about having some kind of a finished product. That's not what a workshop's for. Changing the color at the top to that kind of a turquoisey copper that's at the top of those towers. And then it's also down below there. It's kind of a blue-green. So again, the shape compared to the value study, almost identical. Just changing colors once in a while is all now. Leave a few little gaps for awnings and stuff one more time. Try and connect my figures down pretty soon if I can. Might want to change to, I'm not a big fan of that real too much pink on that tower, but I'm throwing a little bit of opera in there. I want to be careful and not get too overly colorful with things. Adds more blue to it, so it's a little bit more purple than pink. Yeah, that's fine. The darks are what's going to make the big difference in here with my people and the windows and stuff. That's going to add a lot to this scene. Trying to lose detail right now, not add detail. A few small little light shapes. Those figures have no light on their heads or anything, which makes it a lot easier. Left behind a couple of awnings for the building back there across the way. Connecting some of the shapes for where the figures are going to be. It's just so much more fun with watercolor to paint big shapes. I don't like little brushes and a bunch of little shapes. I love to go at it with a nice big brush and let the water and pigment just kind of merge on the paper. Back to kind of a warm stone color, bringing that down, connecting down to that little spot where I might have a hard edge later. Let it fuzz. And if I can try and leave a little area of that lantern behind, it's not a big deal. There's not that much light on it. It's actually in the shadow, but oops. And then up above, try and paint around my windows one more time, get the shape of that building in, and then leave some of the gaps for windows reflecting the sky. That's why I carried that light blue over there. And there you go. So that's that same big shape. Very descriptive already. The silhouettes, the contours are enough to give the viewer an idea of even doesn't look like an American city already either. Narrow alleys and old elaborate architecture and stuff. I guess it could be out east somewhere, but you don't see a lot of that in Minnesota anyway. I'm gonna go ahead and this is what I usually do on my actual paintings. Once I've got this big connected shape in, I'll come in with a brush with a little thicker paint and just start charging in maybe some colors, jazz it up a little bit. So when you see that, look at all the beautiful transitions of color, big, simple shape, okay? This is what's gonna anchor your painting down. Again, this is what people notice from across the room, the big shapes, not all the little stuff. I'm assuming everybody's good. I'm not really getting anything more in the chat room, so that's good. So now zoom back out again, and now is going to be the time to find some darks details while I'm waiting for this to dry now. I'll go back over to the value study. And this is how we do the lessons in the workshop too, by the way, kind of back and forth between the two. I don't finish the value study before I go to the color one because it's important to have some drying, allow for some drying time, you know, in stages. So a lot of that left building, I'm just going to cover up now too one more time, and leaves what I leave behind isn't light, it'll be middle value. So that's why it was important to cover that whole area on the left. There's no bright sunlight or windows reflecting the sky on that left side. Any detail I leave behind should be middle value. Kind of almost covering the whole thing again. As I get down below, I can leave maybe a couple of doorways and stuff, but overall, what was that? I painted the air too. So now I'm incorporating some of those darker figures at the bottom here. Get my main dark figures in, start working with the big shapes always. Make sure the big shapes are working first and work your way down to the little things. But as soon as I start putting in some of those darks, you get a sense of distance. I don't do a value study for every painting, Kay. But if it's a scene like this where it's more complicated, I will. Lately, I've been painting a few more simpler landscapes and stuff as I've been stuck at home around Vermilion, and I can usually kind of tell what the values are at this point. But this is it's a great thing for helping the students break away from details. That's the biggest thing. I'm trying to, if you want your paintings to look looser, it's so important to find big shapes. Loose painting doesn't come from painting a bunch of little shapes with little brushes. So the value study, the big connected shape, and then copying in color, this really is a nice exercise for getting the students to loosen up their watercolors a little. And the figures are very gestural and simple. I'm not worried about how great they're, well, especially on the value study, but they're just shapes like everything else. Okay. Keep them active. Don't try and make them perfect. If you make them too perfect, they don't look like they're walking in the scene. They look like they're frozen in and pasted in from a photograph. So I don't take that much more time, even on, if I was going to do this on the color painting. I like those quick gestural figures in my scenes. So you can start to see the difference between the two sides of the alley. The left side was middle value for the highlights with a lot of dark. The right side is a lot of middle value with a few darks and lights, because that's catching more sunlight coming in from the left. A few little architectural details above the windows. Doesn't need too much. I don't want to get too carried away with that, but I need to be careful what I do in the background, okay? Too many darks back there is going to compete, and it's going to ruin the sense of depth. So it needs a little bit of detail work with the clock face and maybe just a little bit of that architecture. But I'm going to squint way down, and if I see something that's just slightly darker, I'll put a little bit of that in. When I go to put my darks in, just because I'm making smaller marks, I start adding a little bit of variety with my darks. They're not all just one big puddle like the middle value. So obviously the figures are a darker dark. And as I work my way back, I'm at the darker shapes that I'm adding aren't nearly as dark as the figures. So it's helping a bit with the illusion of detail, but it's not drawing the eye too close. Now that sign, that hanging sign on the end, I'm not sure if I wanted it in the painting. I remember when I was doing this, whether or not I even wanted it. So that's another good thing about painting a value study. If all you have is your color painting and you're trying to decide whether or not you want something like that hanging sign in, you put it in, and if you don't like it, good luck. Now you got to try and lift it out and ruin your painting, okay? So by having a value study there, I can put it in and decide, do I like it? Does it need it? Do I want to move it? Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing in that background or on the color one. And just because it hasn't dried quite yet, I'm going to start with those distant ones, because not only will they be just slightly darker, but they might fuzz a little bit too. So that's why I'm starting with some of those smaller distant darks on the color one. I've already worked them out on the value study. But if I can catch this before it's too dry, and let them be a little bit softer, more muted darks in the background, that will help. Now you got to be really careful when you do this, because if I come in with this brush, I have a paper towel in my hand and I keep wiping that brush on that paper towel, because if I have too much water on it and I'm coming in there before this is dry, I get Bloom City. Okay, so I'm really trying to control the amount of moisture on that small brush, and just kind of charging in a few slightly darker shapes back there to indicate the illusion of a few details. But they're fuzzing just a little bit because it's still damp. That'll help. And then I can give this a little bit more time to dry before I start knocking in the darker darks. All right, neutral tint, burnt sienna. Let's start getting that warm dark on this big building now. And then once again, watch what happens as soon as I darken up this building on the left. It sets back the tower into the distance. Leaving a few little middle value shapes behind for windows and stuff. Not too much. I like that little bamboo handled brush that I have. I think Da Vinci, I'm pretty sure it's a Da Vinci brush. But I have a whole variety of brushes. Most of them are natural hair, kind of small little squirrel hair things. But obviously now that I'm on the dark, I'm working with smaller brushes. Okay, so again, that wasn't, when you look at the photograph, all those windows and doorways and stuff and the details on that building, that would just, I have no interest in painting all that. That's not why I took this painting or this photograph. Okay, it was, I want to get the tower coming through the alley. If I spend a lot of time on that left building, that's where the viewer's eye will get there and just stop because I've overworked it. It's important to let the viewer's eye be able to travel back into the distance without seeing all those little shapes on there. So I'm purposely trying to keep that pretty vague. Putting a little bit of some pure color where the clothing is for these figures, maybe some turquoise or red or whatever. That's why I have some of those cadmium reds and turquoisey colors and stuff on my palette. For clothing and awnings and shop fronts and stuff. But most of the rest of that building are natural grays and browns and blues. All right, repaint my main figure here. Nice dark jacket. It's amazing how often this happens, that the figures in your paintings are actually darker than their surroundings. So in your earlier washes, you don't have to leave white holes where your figures are and paint around them. You can paint right through them like 80% of the time. And then they're on top. I'm just, when I paint these guys, I paint them and I use my finger to kind of smudge it. Okay, they're in this shadow. It's not really wet, but there's still a little bit of kind of a shadow or reflection coming down underneath them. So I paint the shape of their legs and I just kind of smudge it with my finger a little bit, soften it down. Get a little bit more brown and where her face is going to be, and then I can start popping in a few more figures back there. Make sure that they're touching and overlapping a little bit, okay? I'm gonna zoom in for you so you can see while I'm painting these figures, they're not great shapes by any means as I'm painting them. They're very loose, just like I was talking about when I did the value study too. I might be a little bit more careful on the color painting, but not much. People tend to do the opposite when they're painting figures in their paintings. You need to paint them in a matter of a couple of minutes, and then instead they spend 15 minutes trying to paint them, and they try and make them better and better and better, and they just get worse and worse and worse. As long as they're slightly humanoid shapes, the viewer will see figures walking around in your painting. Same thing, just kind of smudging with my finger to blend it. And that also helps the illusion that they're walking too. If it doesn't just end where their feet are, again, that photographic stiff look of everything being frozen. Now I'm using some red on there to, again, now that I'm in the figures, maybe give her a red hat and put some blues and stuff, change the colors a little bit. But they're still dark, so you're limited somewhat in what you can do. Join her with the gentleman with her. Smudge their feet too. I'm a mess by the time I finish painting. I got paint on my fingers and forehead and clothes. I just love that when you can see again that underlying wash, the middle value wash on those buildings and stuff. Those color transitions are so fun. That's what makes watercolor look like watercolor. Just tiny little shapes in the distance that the viewer will see as more people when all is said and done. All right, get this one more larger figure on the side. How am I doing on time? Am I doing okay, everyone? I can fast forward a little bit here if you need me to while I'm putzing around on details, but you let me know. I know it's fun to watch a little bit of this kind of stuff too, but it is a little bit like watching grass grow when you start putting in these small shapes. All right, I think I got to start putting in some of the detail on the right side building now. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, thanks. I know you said I didn't have an hour. That's why I was trying to speed it up. All right, a little bit of dry brushing for some texture in there. I didn't do it on the value study, but I need something to break up that shadow area a little bit better on the color version. Real light touch, okay? I've got some thicker, drier paint, and I'm just brushing that, using that brush to kind of use the texture of the paper there. It's a cold pressed paper. It's got a little bit of tooth to the surface, so I'm using that to my advantage. All right, now I got to get the details on the right side building, and that should be pretty close to wrapping it up once I get those in. I like painting my doorways and windows like this too, okay? I do a quick dry brush stroke. I don't like them too solid. They become very obtrusive if you paint windows and doorways as solid rectangles, so. Kay's asking in the chat, when I'm doing a real painting, what's my preferred paper and size? I do like to use Saunders paper for the most part. I also use Milford paper from the same company. St. Cuthbert's Mill makes Saunders, and they also have Milford paper, which is brighter white. It's kind of a newer paper. And I'll use Winsor Newton paper sometimes. I've got a little bit of that on hand in the studio. There's a new paper that's coming out, a Chinese-made paper that Joseph Zbukovic has been working with. They're over there. It's from Baohong, Baohong. And I think you might be able to get it on Amazon, but everybody swears that it feels and looks similar to Arches, but it's better than Arches. Arches has gone a little bit downhill lately, so Baohong paper, that's another good one. Okay, putting that sign back in because I liked it on the value study. I worked through that, and it was another little detail there in the front. Just you can see how little I did on the building on the right. It doesn't take much. And again, these are exercises. If I was doing a painting, yes, I would do a little bit more work on there, but trying to keep it simple. At some point, you just kind of have to squint and ask yourself, is this working okay? Where do I need a few more little things to make it a bit more convincing? But if you look at it with your eyes kind of squinted and you get a good sense of light and shadow and it's convincing, but yet it still has some mystery into it, that's probably a good time to stop and walk away from it. You might have to come back to it and you know, add a few little details later, but this bell tower is in, I taught a work, I can't remember actually, now that I think about it, I was going to say Italy, but it might actually be France. I just pulled this reference photograph out of my SCADs, thousands and thousands of photos I have on my computer from my trips. Carolyn was actually in France with me. Carolyn might know if this was France or not, but it might be in Italy. So there you have it. That was the initial photo that I took. Let me go back to that, by the way, because I want to address that real quickly here. How I changed the composition. The photograph that I took initially, you look at that, see how the clock tower is almost dead center, and all the dead space, I mean, not dead space, but all that building on the left, that was just way too much. Okay, I loved the clock tower coming out. That was kind of the star of the show, but by including all that information in my photograph, it becomes diminished and dwarfed by everything else. And not only that, but then I have to do all that drawing and worry about all those windows and doors on the left when it's really not important. Okay, so I cropped it in, made it a vertical, made the clock tower, the bell tower more prominent, and that became the star of the show from the painting. So I'll zoom out a little bit here, but I think that is pretty much to the end. I can stop. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. We go back here. I hope everybody enjoyed that. Chat.
So do we have more questions? I can hardly wait till January.
It'll be fun. And like I said, we'll have, I'll send a photo that for every day's lesson that we'll all be doing something similar to this. When I do the workshop, I like to cover a few different aspects of the landscape. So I usually have one that's uh, more of a sky, so we can just kind of work on painting a nice sky again. And I'll do one that's more of a street scene, so I can talk about people and cars and that kind of thing. Oh, somebody wanted to see the final again. Let me share my screen again. Sorry about that. Let me do that, sorry. So there's the final. And so I'll do one with a street scene with people and stuff in it. And then I'll do another one with water and reflections, so we can talk a little bit about that too. So it's good. I try and, you can't cover everything. Obviously, water alone is could be a month-long workshop, but I try and just cover the big basics of the landscape through it, so that you can watch me and paint along with me. Like I said, with maybe it's a sunset sky, maybe it's a stormy sky. I don't know yet what we'll be doing, but something where we have to deal with clouds and then people and cars and figures and buildings and water and boats and stuff. So it'll be a nice variety.
Andy, thank you so much. You want to unshare your screen now?
Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Andy's going to be teaching January 12th and 13th, and then the 14th and the 15th. We've broken it into 2 segments. We're finding that doing this via Zoom, that works better. But if you want to do all 4 days, like he said, he's going to do separate classes, separate demos, different reference photos, but you'll learn some of the same techniques that he uses. And
sorry to interrupt. Carla asked, is the middle value painted wet and dry? The paper's only wet on the first wash. Yeah, that's the only time I wet my paper first, is for the first wash. After that, it's just dry paper. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
that was on the color side though, right?
The color side, that's the only time I wet it. So the value study, I skip the light wash. I go right to middle value. So it's on dry paper. On the color painting, I wet the painting first, the paper first, that first light wash, very loose and free and stuff. And then as the paper's drying, I just keep working darker on it.
Speaking of paper, would you spell that brand again?
Sure. It's BAOHONG. Bao
B
Hong.
as in boy?
Yep.
B,
BAO.
okay, long. Okay.
Yep. And I think
Alright.
I haven't tried to find it yet. They gave me a little bit last time I was in China to try. And then Joseph Zbukovic, somebody put it in the chat. Thanks, Susan. And Joseph Zbukovic really liked it. He's been a big star in China for a long time. And he actually went over there and worked with their factories and the people who own the company. And he's got his own kind of block of Baohong paper now. And I've noticed when he posts a painting on Instagram and stuff now, a lot of times he's promoting that paper, that Baohong paper. And it sounds like it's pretty good. So it should be another good option.
There's some comments there. Where is this paper available? And Tom Shaler is using it now too.
Oh, Tom was using it now too. Yeah. It's going to be big because it's good and cheap, a lot of what China makes.
So Andy, tell us a little bit, who inspired you? And did you have an admiration for a particular artist, or what happened?
Yeah. A lot of how I paint, I've gleaned from an artist by the name of Trevor Chamberlain, a British artist, watercolor artist, well, watercolor and oil painter. But he doesn't teach. He doesn't have DVDs or anything, but I have his books. And I've always really admired the British landscape artists because they just have a beautiful way of, I like their color palette, number one. It's a lot more natural looking, a lot of the grays and browns and stuff that I see here in the Midwest. I love the scenes that they tackle, just the small towns and the country, pastoral countryside and stuff. It just spoke to me, and I liked the way they handled it. So I started following the British watercolor artists. So Trevor Chamberlain was a big one. Edward Seago is another one, Seago. So if you look at some of their work, I think you'll be very inspired by it. Trevor Chamber. Let me type their names into the chat so you can see it. And,
There's nothing like a scene in England with the stone walls and a few trees
Right?
and those white sheep standing out in the field.
I have a DVD available through APV Films that I went to England a couple summers ago and shot plein air painting out there in the Cotswolds. And I got to stay with the people who run the company at their little house in the Cotswolds, and I want to move there. It's amazing. Oh, I just love it.
It's a beautiful country.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a few names into the chat right now for you to check out. Some of my favorite British watercolor artists, and you'll see some oil paintings by them also. But there's books. Trevor, there's a couple of good books on Trevor Chamberlain. One is just a watercolor book. Another one is called England and Beyond, where it has a mix of his oils and watercolors. Same thing with Ed Siegel. You'll probably find a few different books on his work out there too. With watercolor and oil mix. I tell people all the time, a lot of the paintings that I admire and I've learned from, they're not always necessarily just watercolor. You know, painting's painting. A lot of what I'm looking at is the way they tackle the scene, the way they simplify it, you know, the technical aspects, the differences between watercolor and oil. A little bit of that you have to work out for yourself, but I'm more interested in their subject matter and how they simplify things. So.
Well, we thank you very much for spending time with our SOG members. If anybody has any more questions, now's the time. And if that's it, we will thank you and we'll see you in January, okay?
Cheers.
Oh, cheers. I started too.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, I'm sure I'm not.
Okay, have a great evening and thank you everybody for attending. We had 60 people at the peak.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, everybody.
Woohoo. Yeah. All right. Let's see how many people sign up. All right. Take care. And I'm going to sign off now. Bye-bye.
Bye now.